Throughout my 20 years as a restorative dentist before becoming an orthodontist, I had the opportunity to hear a lot of amazing voices on my journey to creating my best practice. I hired clinical coaches, I brought in consultants, and I even spent up to a year in certain business programs to maximize my profits and reduce my stress. Now, one of the most vocal leaders in the dental profession for the last 35 years has been Dr. Howard Farran. Now, he's the kind of guy that if you get him going, he can talk about almost anything in depth, and he's very passionate. So, as I always tell you, buckle up or grab that drink or get on the treadmill. But you do not want to lose your grip while holding on, listening to Dr. Howard Farran. Well, greetings, Orthopreneurs. Today, we have an amazing guest, somebody who's led the dental profession for many years in many ways. We'll talk about it. But please welcome Dr. Howard Farran. Welcome to the Orthopreneurs podcast.
Hey, we should start a mutual admiration club. I'm a huge fan of yours too. Love what you're doing, and love the fact that you're the only orthodontist I've ever met that was first a general dentist, got his FAGD. You were totally a kingpin general dentist, and then became a specialist. That's very, very rare. It kind of reminds me when I went to MBA school, 80% of the class had just graduated from business at ASU, and now they're like 22 and going to get their MBA. Whereas 20% of the class had been out of school 10 years, working at all these big companies. And I just really love the fact that you crushed it in general dentistry before you became an orthodontist. That's very, very cool.
Well, thank you. And coming from a Magid, talking about my faggot, I appreciate it. Because I know you're a master of the Academy of General Dentistry, and I'm just a mere fellow. And for those out there who don't know, to become a master, I don't even know what percentage of dentists even obtain mastership, but it's got to be less than 1%, right?
Yeah, it's pretty rare.
Yeah, it's rare. So you embody kind of what I try to talk to people about, which is become a great clinician and become a great businessman. The two are not mutually exclusive from one another. You can become an amazing clinician and a master, and you can become an amazing business person. Because you and I, we're already jumping into it here, but you and I, over a few years of dentistry that we've practiced, we've seen our fair share of clinicians who want to go down with the ship and say, I don't need to be a good businessman. I do great dentistry, and that's enough for me. And my practice will go great just because I do great dentistry, a great ortho. And you've seen that a few times, right?
Yeah, and that's where at my age, my four boys, they've all flown the nest. They all own their own home. They've made me 4, 5, 6, 7 grandkids. And that's the red line I draw in the sand. I mean, when you look at all the great countries, greatest companies, they were all, their founder was, the engineer making the car or whatever. And I look at my grandkids, and when I pass on, if my grandkid goes to a dentist and it's owned by Cigna or it's owned by Kaiser Permanente, and the insurance companies are telling them what to do, or she goes to another dental office and is owned by Wall Street MBA saying, well, don't do a crown. Don't do a filling, do a crown. I mean, where are my grandchildren going to go when they need to go to the dentist? And I think the red line in the sand for all companies, you look at Boeing. Boeing's a classic example. Boeing makes airplanes, and they moved their management team to Chicago for international business reasons. And their planes are made in Seattle, and the fuselage is made in Wichita, Kansas. And then their planes start falling out of the sky. Compare that to Mr. Honda, who made every single thing in one facility. And when you shut down the line, an alarm went off. And the classic story was like 2 a.m, and the line shut down. And he jumped out of bed like a fireman, ran all the way to the line, forgetting, of course, he slept in his birthday suit. And there he is naked, reworking the line and getting it back up. And here's Boeing with planes falling out of the sky. And the red line in the sand has to be that only dentists own dental offices. I mean, all the states put that up, and the DSOs are trying to get around it by saying, well, we'll put this doc in charge of it. But the bottom line is, my grandchildren, they need a dentist. And if you're working for the insurance company or you're working for Wall Street, that's fine. but not for my grandchild. My grandchild needs to go find a damn dentist. And I have faith because all the DSOs stopped going into the rural because they can't find a doc in the box in the rural. So half of America is saved from Wall Street dentistry and dental insurance. And I also think that these are crazy times because you have to be my age to remember inflation. I graduated from high school in 1980, and it was 70 to 80, when my dad opened up 9 Sonics because I was that dumb little kid who was out there changing the prices on the hamburgers on all the, it had 24 stalls. So I had to go through 24 stalls and scrape off the little sticker that said 99 cents and move it to $1.19. So if you're locked into a flat insurance fee and inflation goes up 10% or 20% or whatever the hell they open, and then on top of that, now the government wants to add dentistry to Medicare. So these are strange times, and these are when the dentists need to see clearly, and that is, I'm a dentist, the patient wants to see a dentist, and Mr. Medicare, you stand over there, Kaiser Permanente, you stay over there, Wall Street, you stay over there, because first I got to treat Howard's grandchildren, and if you can't convince my granddaughter, who just bought $1,000 iPhone on her own damn credit card, if you can't convince her to pay me $300 for a filling, that's all you, buddy. It's not free enterprise. It's not capitalism. It's you throwing in the towel and saying, well, nobody cares. They're just going to do whatever the insurance says. They're just going to do whatever Wall Street says. So this is what my passion is. I'm just trying to hang on. I'm just trying to whine to the most number of young dentists to keep our profession sacred and sovereign, so that at least my grandchildren, I don't know about my great-grandchildren, but at least my grandchildren can have a dentist after I'm gone.
You just covered every topic. So thank you, everybody, for listening to Howard Farran today. It's been a great podcast episode, and I really want to thank you for being here, Howard. You literally just touched on like 90% of the things I was going to ask you about. And but no, let's go back to a couple of things you talked about. One of them that's interesting is inflation, because I've seen you post on things on Twitter related to, I think you had a really good post not long ago about the Buffett line, right? I don't know if you posted on, I think it was you. I posted about,
I'm posting for Howard Farran. I don't do posting for Downtown, Orthotown.
No.
Anything Howard Farran is only for me.
Yeah, but it was great because you graduated high school in 1980. I graduated high school in 1984. We're contemporaries. We've seen a few things in our time frame. So did you graduate dental school in 88, 86, 87, I mean?
I did undergrad in 3 years. I got accepted to Creighton Med and then after 3. And so I got out of dental school in 87.
So I got out of school in 92. And so between us, we've got roughly 65 years of, right? Not 60, 55. No, 65. You've been out of school now, 35 years or so, right? 36 years?
Yeah.
34. And I've been out of school almost 30. So between us, we got almost 65 years and we've seen some changes, right? You and I both remember the good old days of, I was joking about it the other day in our Orthopreneurs group about the wiggle bug. Remember the wiggle bug with the amalgam? You remember you put the amalgam in the amalgamator, and it was actually called the wig. It was called the wig L bug. And I remember like you had a container of mercury that my father would tell me my dad owned a dental office. So he'd say, put 2 drops of mercury in for every pellet. And then you'd mix it up. And sometimes the jar would break and all the mercury would go onto the carpeted floor of his operatory. And I'd play with it. And, I'm surprised I haven't gone absolutely insane. But things have changed a little bit. And you and I remember the mid 70s where, interest rates were, 20%, 16, 17, 18%. So you posted recently personally about the Buffett line, which was great, talking about an overvalued or perceived overvalued stock market. And we're in really uncharted territory, truthfully, if we go based upon the chart that Warren Buffett created, right? That,
So I got to tell you one little story first. It was so funny. So when my boys were about 2, 4, 6, and 8, one of my friends bought a really old dental office in South Phoenix. And he called me up and said, hey, Friday, I'm going to rip the carpet out of the operatories and we're going to tile it because of OSHA and HIPAA and all that stuff. And so he went down and pulled up all the carpet and there were bowls of mercury.
Yep.
And my 4 boys and his 3 boys and daughter were just kicking these bowls of mercury and they hit the wall and turn into 2. Oh my God, it was just so hilarious. But yeah, Warren Buffett. And by the way, I grew up in Wichita, Kansas, so Kansas didn't have a dental school, so I went to Creighton because they had a dental school in Omaha, Nebraska, and that's where Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger were from. And then my freshman year at Creighton Business 101, the instructor got Warren to come over and lecture to our class.
Wow.
But anyway, he's been, so I've been listening to him since 1980, Berkshire Hathaway, Class A and B stock, all that stuff. But
if you got it, by the way, if you got into Berkshire Hathaway Class A stocks early on, God bless you. What is it trading at now for those out there who don't follow it?
Oh my God, you that's why I have the Class B share. So let me see what Warren's
I remember in 1996 when I moved to Seattle, someone told me about Berkshire Hathaway Class B at that point, and the price was like ridiculously low. I could have purchased a ton. I didn't have any money. I was a newer dentist and couldn't afford it, but I can't even imagine what Berkshire Hathaway goes for these days.
$34,000 a share.
How much? 434?
434,000. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think if I'm not mistaken, I could be way off, but I believe that back in the day in 96-ish, when I looked at it, it was trading, I think it was trading somewhere around $30,000, $34,000. And I could have bought, at 34,000, now it's at 434,000. It's crazy to believe that there's a stock out there like that. But going back to what you're talking about with
I got out of dental school, it was $2,900 a share. When I listened to Warren talk the first time, it was $310 a share.
Oh my God.
Today, it's it's 97,000 a share. It was up
the bees.
Yeah.
It's amazing. But I want to ask you a question, because you're obviously very knowledgeable and you've been around the block a few times. I believe right now we really are in truly uncharted territory. I think COVID has changed a lot of demographic stuff. And I don't know if anybody really knows where we're headed. But if I was going to say to you, I'm not putting you on the record to have to say, do this or don't do that. Where do you see the dental profession itself and in the next, I'm not going to say 5, 10, 15 years from now, but, do you think that economically speaking, we're in for a little bit of a tougher time in the next year or 2 or 3?
Okay, I've thought, I'm obsessed with this answer. I got an MBA from Arizona State University, big Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger fan. But basically what Warren taught was that if you go into any country like the United States and say the Wilshire 5,000 index, all the publicly traded companies, the publicly traded companies in the last 70 years, they usually trade at about 70 times the value of the United States GDP. And anytime it gets over that mark and gets up to like 1.1, 1.2, whatever, it obviously is going to trend down. And Charlie Munger explains it the best. He goes, if something mathematically cannot happen, it's probably not going to happen. Well, the profits kept growing. Eventually, the profits of the stock market, the profit dollars would be greater than the entire economy, and that doesn't make any sense to anyone. How could the publicly traded company's net income be greater than the United States of America? And right now, we're at it's the highest the Buffett index has ever been. It passed 2. So the stocks are twice. Now you got to remember, when we go back before the pandemic, Warren and Charlie were sitting on about $145 billion in cash, and they hadn't bought anything. And they were saying, "I don't see any value." These, when the market's 30 times price earnings. And by the way, when people look at markets like 6 to 8 times earnings, this isn't some Wall Street something they made up. This goes back to I'm Irish. During the famine, if you couldn't afford to get out of Ireland, they'd say, "Hey, be an indentured service. I'll give you a ride all the way to America, but you have to be my slave for 7 years." And people said they would do that. Now imagine now Tesla, which is trading at 1,500 times earnings. If a kid came out of dental school and I said to him, and I pitched this to kids, and they said, "Yes, I know this work." I said, "If you work for me for free for 6 to 8 years, we'll just call it, we'll split it. We'll say 7 years. You work for me for 7 years. I will give you this whole land building business, and you can make your own income on a part-time job, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, something else. Would you do that?" I've had dentists say, yeah, I absolutely would work for you for free for 7 years to get that. So if I went back to that kid and said, well, will you work for me for 35 years? He'd say, well, of course not. I'm almost dead and retired. If I said, well, will you work for me from the fall of the Roman Empire till today for 1,500 years for one share of Tesla? It's insane. So there's no question. And by the way, I sold my McMansion. I wanted the $1 million cash. I didn't want to have my $1 million wrapped up in that. I am cash until the crash. And this is going to end very badly. I graduated from dental school in 87, and then that was Black Thursday. It was like 100 days later. Then the longest expansion, the Y2K, that completely crashed. Then Lehman Brothers completely crashed. This is the mother of all insanity. And when the COVID eventually came out, we got to go back to 2020 March. The market dipped about $890 billion. Let's just call it $1 trillion for easy math. And the Trump-Biden response to $1 trillion contraction was to print $5 trillion. And these young kids say, well, we're at the same debt to GDP at the end of World War II. No, World War II, the people got their cash out from underneath their bed and bought war bonds that paid them $0.05 a year. And that was all cash. This was not they didn't collect $5 trillion in taxes to bill it out. They completely printed the money. Right now in the world economy, 3 out of every 5 US dollars were printed, counterfeited in the last year. It's completely insane. This will end badly, quicker and sooner rather than longer. I don't see how this could stay propped up for an entire year. I mean, it's August. If you really think this time next year in August, bring me back on the show to stock market's higher than it is now a year from now and say, Howard, you're the stupidest idiot I ever podcasted. This is going to be horrible. And that's why Warren Buffett is sitting on $145 billion in cash, because if that 25 times earnings market drops down to 6 or 8, he's going to put all that cash to work and write it back up. And I've been following that guy since I first met him in 1980. And like I say, I sold my home. I'm living like a peasant. I'm not even buying a new car. I'm driving a Lexus that was in 2004 with 180,000 miles on, because I know each one of those dollars. I got $1 million in my checking account. I mean, because who cares if I move it to a savings account? What are they going to pay me? 0.01. I mean, I'm going to make 1 penny, on $1,000 for a year. And I'm not a. I know there's, my two older sisters are nuns. I know in religion, there's a lot of the doom and gloom, the end of the world is coming. I know in Wall Street, there are analysts that have been preaching doom and gloom for 30 years. I'm not a doom and gloomer. The math just doesn't add up. I mean, right now, the math is that someday the earnings in the stock market are going to be greater than the entire GDP of America. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's stupid. It's insane. And I'm cash until the crash, period.
Well, so my question for you then is, and there's a lot of discussion about the Buffett line, whether historically low interest rates might bail out some of the economy to some extent. But let's assume that you're right and that a lot of the experts are correct and that, the stock market is trading at a huge overvaluation. And that in the next 6 months, year, whenever that number is, and nobody can predict exactly, there's going to be a huge correction, something substantial, something akin to 2008, perhaps, which is driven by a completely different set of circumstances, but nonetheless, corrections happen. What would you say to that young dentist, or in this case, since a lot of orthodontists are listening to us and watching us, what would you say to that young orthodontist or dentist who's coming out of school? Just came out of school. We're recording this in August. They came out in June or May. They got $350,000 in debt. They're just trying to make their way in the world of dentistry. And understandably, they hear us and they're scared to death right now of, oh my God, did I just make the biggest mistake in the world about becoming a dentist or an orthodontist? What advice would you give them for right now where they are and what the future could hold for them?
Okay, I just want to be clear on one thing. I do have an MBA. I walk the talk. But I hope no one thinks it's my advice.
No. That's why I made it clear. You're saying what a lot of that's why I asked it. You're not alone. There are many people out there who say the stock market is completely overvalued. We all know that when the stock market is completely overvalued, there tends to be a correction. When that correction happens, it translates through the economics of the entire United States or the world, and it rebounds. It always rebounds at some point, unless you live in Japan.
Yeah, you never bet against America on the long term, because America always makes the exactly right decision when they exhausted every other alternative. You know what I mean? And then when it's finally realized, like, well, we've tried everything and nothing works, we might as well do the obvious. But I want to say two things. I want to say that one, during his lecture at Creighton, someone asked a funny question. They said, well, Creighton is known for their medical school, dental school, law school. Which one would you be? And everybody giggled because we're all pre-debt and most are pre-med and some are pre-law. He said, well, never go into health insurance, because you never want to go into health or healthcare, because it's very capital intensive and someone else sets your fee. You have to have the power to price. And that is the dangerous element of these kids coming out of school. Now, when they come out of school with student loans, well, if inflation takes off, it's gonna cut their student loans down. It's gonna chop them down like a forest. So if you have $300,000 in student loans, what you definitely want is 20% inflation for 5 years to run that number to nothing. But the bottom line is, dentistry is a 200-year-old profession. It started with Pierre Fichard in France, and a cleaning, exam, filling, x-ray. That the dental industry, if the economy goes up 3%, it'll maybe go up 4%. If the economy contracts 3%, maybe go down 4%. There's only two areas of the dental economy that are growing at twice the rate of inflation, and that is clear aligners and implants. And what is amazing about clear aligners and implants is the government doesn't set the fee. Now, the reason I'm so against socialized medicine is because I only know dentistry. And when I was podcasting in Tokyo, in Paris, and London, these Japanese dentists would tell me, well, the socialized insurance only gives me $100 US for a molar root canal. And I'm in Tokyo, where land is $1 million a square meter. I can't do that. I can't even extract the molar for $100. So what they do, it's not on the treatment plan. That tooth needs to be extracted, and we need to put in a $1,500 implant and a $1,500 crown, because he can charge $3,000 and maybe make a $600 or $700 profit off that $3,000. And that's what they do in France and London. So what I would tell the young kids is who cares if you have $1 million practice, a third-party dental insurance sets your fees, and on that $1 million after your overhead, you make $80,000. I'd rather you do $250,000 and on your own fees, and have $100,000 overhead and take home $150,000.
Yeah, and the lower overhead means you sleep better at night.
Yeah, you can't, the way the Federal Reserve is when they keep interest rates. Remember, interest rates are gravity to the stock market. So they keep the interest rates at zero for 20 years. Everybody's been saying that Greenspan is a genius and all these guys are geniuses. They destroyed all savings. It used to be when I was little, you'd say, okay, well, what do I have to live on? What do I need to live on for a month? And then if you put $1 in the savings account, it'd pay you a nickel a year for eternity. So if you sit there and you needed $10,000 a month, you would just take $10,000 and you would divide that by divided by 0.05, and then you know that you'd have to have $200,000 times 0.05. To get you $10,000 a month. So every $10,000 a month or $10,000 a year you needed to live on, you would need $200,000 in the savings. Well, they've destroyed all savings. So what that does is that people say, well, I'm not going to make any money in my savings, so I might as well throw it into Tesla or throw it into all these Alphabet and Google and Facebook and all these stocks like that, because the Federal Reserve has destroyed savings, which then goes back to historical. historical, you always want to play the same hand as the empire. So when the Roman Empire was everything was gold and silver coins, you wanted to own gold and silver. And right now the empire has $22 trillion of debt, and they don't want to pay that off with real dollars. They want to pay that off with weaker, cheaper, inflationary dollars. So you have to play the hand of the government, and the government doesn't want you to have any savings. It wants to destroy the U.S. currency. It can't get the people to pay more taxes for what they need. So they just run $1 trillion a year deficit ever since Ronald Reagan, the great conservative, who said, you don't have to pay your bills, just print the money. And I graduated in 80 when Ronald Reagan came to power. And now it's 40 years later. And for 40 years, everybody just wants to play with funny money. So it's a complete joke. And the empire is definitely in trouble. And, so I would just sit there and I would build a dental office with very, very low overhead. And seeing that there's 185, or there's about 208 countries, and I've lectured in 50 of them. So I've seen various countries at various stages of this race my whole life. And what they end up doing is realizing that, in America, the first practice management firm was Quest. And they go into any dental office, and the dentist had one chair and maybe two if he had a hygienist, and nobody could get in. And all they did is said, you know what? If you just double the number of operatories, that's all you do, just the infrastructure. Just add 2 more ops, and then we find everybody that doubled their capacity. It's kind of like the drive-through lane at the bank. They only need one lane 160 hours a week, but on Friday, when everybody gets paid, they open up all 3 lanes, and so your capacity has to meet your flow, not like Henry Ford, where if I want to build a million Ford Escorts a year, I build one assembly line that dumps out 83,330 or 86,666 a month or whatever. So that was the deal, that add more capacity, expanded functions with assistants and hygienists, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, that game is dead. The playing dentistry on a game of volume died a decade ago. And how it died was when I got out of school, I would send all the insurance companies my fees, and they accepted all my fees, and all they did is come back and say, okay, Howard, I'll pay you 100% for clean exam and x-ray, I'll pay you 80% for fillings, endo, and 50% for crowns, dentures, partials, what have you. And then about 10 years, and any idiot could come out of school. I remember I graduated in dental school, I opened up my office. I think the first month I did 60,000 and netted 20,000. And back in dental school, I was making $3 an hour. And now I'm making $20,000 net income a month. And I had just 5 staff members. And then about 10 years later, they said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to tell you what the fee is, and then we're going to pay the set. So it went from indemnity insurance paying a percentage of my fee to now a negotiated fee schedule that 95% of the dentists are on. And they've held that $1,000 max. The raises have been very slow, letting inflation come away. If you took that $1,000 max when insurance came out it was about 1947, it was after World War II, that the Longshoremen's Club, the President of the United States had set a deal that due to the war, you could not raise labor, you could not go on strike for wages. We were going to keep labor fixed because of World War II. But when the war was ended, they didn't stop that. So then all the labor unions started longshoremen and said, well, if you can't pay us more money, we'll pay for our dental insurance. And then that started in Washington and Oregon and California, and that turned into Delta. And they kept that $1,000. And so the bottom line is, here's the succinct answer. You own a milk cow. And if that milk cow drops you a gallon of milk every morning, and you can price that, you have the power to price that gallon of milk, you're going to be fine, because the real economy is not the government, it's not the Federal Reserve. It's 8 billion humans don't want to sleep under a rain cloud. They want a home. 8 billion people wake up. They want some damn breakfast. They want some eggs and bacon and milk. And that's the real economy. What the government has done to distort it has nothing to do with the real economy. But once you lose your power to price, once you don't have the right to own your land, once you don't have the right to hire your own employees and fire them for whatever reason you want, and so you want to own your own land, own your own building, and have your little milk cow there. And if the price is double, well, then milk goes from $1 a gallon to $2 a gallon. And if it doubles again, it goes to $4. That's the real economy. So you want to have the power to price. And once you lose the power to price, you've lost everything. And the fact that the government is now getting into bed, the president of the American Dental Association just published a letter, and he's an oral surgeon who I love and adore. He's right here in Tucson in my backyard. But again, history always repeats itself. The doctors think that when Medicare is going to start paying for dentistry, that's a good thing. Dude, you're now going to get in bed with the federal government. And if you get in bed with anybody, you're going to get screwed before you get out of bed. It's no questions asked. And medicine was fine before LBJ got the Medicare passed. And my gosh, the physicians, they now 70% of all physicians do not work for themselves. 50% work for a hospital, and 20% work for like a DSO, a medical services organization. We're down to 30%. Only 3 in 10 MDs work for themselves and do medicine like you want to treat other people like you want to be treated. So right now, after everything that's gone wrong in my lifetime, from high school graduation in 1980 to now 2021, now the best idea that dentists have is to go get in bed with the federal government's Medicare, and they're going to be screwed so many times if they've never had a tonsillectomy. They're going to get one now. It's going to, they're just going to be shoved, their tonsils and adenoids. They're going to be coughing those things up in no time. And it's just, that's why healthcare, it's going to take you down and kill you. So get into implants. If you love blood and guts, and I can always tell by looking at your x-ray for endo. If you're like me, and when you do a root canal, you get all the way to the end, and you want to puff the sealer out the apex, you're an apical barbarian, and you love blood and guts and surgery, and when you pop a big pimple in the mouth, a big abscess, and pus slides out, your assistant goes,
Yeah. Howard, I just want to tell you, as an orthodontist, you brought back such great memories for me. There was nothing I enjoyed more when someone came in with like a chronic apical abscess, a big old thing, and I'd get them numb and take out a scalpel and just slice it open and you remember, I don't know what it's been 11 years since I did any restorative, or 10 years. I don't know what they used, but I was taught, take sterile rubber dam, cut it into an eye, shape of a capital I, and suture in a piece into that abscess after you did the endo or whatever you were doing. And it was so great. When you put scalpel to boil, I might make every orthodontist out there throw up right now. But that was arguably one of the greatest things in ortho, in dentistry, was just to slice that open. And I made sure my assistant had a surgical suction tip right there, because I did not want to wear that home. But it was so incredibly fulfilling.
And, I just had dinner in Santa Fe last month with one of my classmates, and he did not like that blood and guts. And sure enough, he's all bleaching, bonding, veneers, clear aligners, all that. And I'm an apical barbarian. They're pulp lovers. They wanted to stop their root canal a 0.5 millimeter at the terminal apex. And they love bleaching, bonding, veneers, all that kind of stuff. So those are your two choices. I mean, this trunk of this dentistry comes out with 2 branches, and it's either blood, guts, pus, and implants, or it's clean and pretty, bleaching, bonding, veneers, and clear aligners. But let me tell you about clear aligners. I was in, I had 3 of my 4 boys with me. We were lecturing in Cambodia, Myanmar, Shenzhen, Hong Kong. It was an Asian tour. And every bar or restaurant we went into, as soon as the waitress knew that I was a dentist, first question out of their mouth is clear aligners. And here's this beautiful young waitress, and she wants to spend, $1,000 US on clear aligners. And I'm just looking at like, okay, well, first of all, you're gorgeous, because basically anyone under 40 or 30, the older I get, I keep raising the age, but there's no such thing as an ugly person under 25 years old or 30. And the fact that they want to spend $1,000 goes back to that principle that the number one goal of the species is to reproduce, have offspring. The most complicated behavior on earth is the mating process between animals. The mating process between humans is so complex. Think of a peacock. And when they come out of school and when they get older, they want to gain anything they can on their peacock feathers to increase their chance that they're going to attract another primate to mix gametes and incubate out a reproduced baby. And my gosh, it's the same thing with implants. If you're asking them about implants because you think they can't chew, you miss the whole boat. They're getting implants because when they smile, they're missing a bicuspid, and it shows. I'll just end on my first major implant case. Oh my God, it was back in, I just got my fellowship in the mission student, my diplomat in the International Congress of Ortho, all that stuff. And this lady come in, and she'd been coming to me for years, and 2 or 3 years, and she said she wanted the fixed implants and for her lower. She had upper natural teeth, and I said, well, Karen, you always told me that you never had any problems chewing with it. You told me you could eat oranges. What's the deal? And you know what she said to me? She's like 80 years old. She said, well, you know, all my girlfriends are dying, and they always die in their sleep, and I can't wear my lower denture to bed with me, and I don't want them to find me in my bed dead with my teeth not in. I'm like, oh my God, you're going to get 6 implants. So if a guy driving the fire truck sees you with teeth in your mouth, I mean, you could throw my ass in the river and feed me to turtles. I wouldn't give a crap. And so it's all, whether it's implants, clear aligners, everything is trying to make them increase their odds of attracting a primate to mix gametes. And that's what you call cosmetic dentistry. And implants is a subset of cosmetic dentistry. It has nothing to do with malocclusion, mastication. They're not they come into you, 100 pounds overweight, and you're asking them if they can chew. Well, I don't know what the hell they're doing. They're getting nutrition in their gut somehow. It's all about looking better.
Yeah, I agree. And, I do remember, I have a question for you, but to your point, most of my patients who I made dentures on, and again, I did it for 20 years, so I made a fair share of dentures. While it's decreasing in the population right now, in 1992, there was no shortage of dentures to be made. And I most of my patients were healthy and vibrant, even when they didn't have dentures. I do remember one gentleman I met him, he was really, really thin. And I made him a set of dentures, and I saw him probably 6 to 9 months later for some sort of, I think it was I don't remember what it was, but maybe it was an immediate set. He wasn't eating well with his teeth. We got him out, got him in a denture, and then I went to reline it probably 6 months later. And I saw him, and he was just fat. He'd eaten probably 40, 50 pounds on in the 6-month period. And then the next time I saw him, he had lost his dentures. Of all places, he'd left them on the bus. I don't know why you take them out on the bus, but he had left them on the seat of the bus, and the bus drove away, and he never got his dentures back. And he had lost all the weight he'd gained since the time he'd left his dentures on the bus, which was really interesting to me to see that particular impact of chewing and nutrition and dentures. But like you said, it's the exception nowadays, not the rule. You touched on something about cosmetic dentistry with clear aligners and bonding and all that other stuff. A large part of this discussion is going to be heard by orthodontists. And one of the big discussions we've had, and I know you've always been a very big advocate of general dentists trying to become masters of everything, not masters per se, but to be able to offer more products on their shelf. What would you tell your friend? You're having a beer, you, me, and another 80s graduate from dental school are all sitting around having a beer, and they're an orthodontist. Maybe it's me. And I say, you know what, Howard, I'm kind of worried. There's so many general dentists doing clear aligners. Should I be worried as an orthodontist? What response would you make to any orthodontist who says to you, there's a lot of general dentists doing clear aligners, and I'm starting to get a little worried about my profession? Or would you say, don't worry about it at all. There's more than enough, fruit for everybody, so to speak.
Well, to me, it's an exact answer. Again, I've lectured 1,000 times. So you take every city in the United States. If it's got 100,000 people, I've lectured it not once, twice, 3 times, maybe 10. The bottom line is this. First of all, there's no orthodontist in half the cities of the United States. Half the cities of the United States do not have one of the 12 recognized specialties by the American Dental Association. So they're only talking about an urban thing. Number 2, Orthodontics is growing at twice the rate of inflation. So the market is growing faster than anything. Number three, you never have a strategy of your future is thinking in fear and scarcity. You think, you could only look back every 100 years from today to the Roman Empire to know that every century is better than the one before it. And I have seen the most successful business model as this. And I can show you guys that the orthodontist said to his referrals, I know if you're going to do Invisalign, it's going to be a class 1 canine, class 1 molar, non-growing adult. It's probably going to be an adult. You're never going to do a class 2. You're never going to do a class 3. So in my office, every night or on Tuesdays and Thursdays, if you have any Invisalign cases or whatever, I'm always here. My door's open at 5 o'clock, and they would come and they would be the mentor of these people. Well, two things always happen, and I've seen this 1,000 times, is dentists don't want to make $6,500 spread out over 2 years. They want to make $6,500 on 2 root canal buildups and crowns and a 3-unit bridge or whatever the hell they're doing. When dentists get into orthodontics, they're usually adding a repertoire. They're adding something. It's usually about 5, maybe 6 or 7% of their income, and they always lose interest in it after 5 years. There was a guy in Albuquerque. I don't want to say his name because we'll probably get back to Craig Steichen, and he got into orthodontics, and me and him went to Richard Litt, and we went to Jack Sheridan, and we went to Harry Green, and we started getting into ortho. And Craig realized, he said, you know what, I don't even like this. So he called his orthodontist. And so I got like all these hundreds of cases going. And one of the orthodontists said, you know what? Transfer me all of those cases. I'll finish them all. If you promise me, I get the rest of your referrals. That was 30 years ago. That orthodontist has probably made a gazillion $1 million. So I would say that don't think in fear and scarcity. These are your referral networks. There's no way they're going to do 100% of ortho cases, and there's no way they're going to do ortho is going to become 25% of their practice until they retire, because I have not seen that. My gosh, when you start talking to ortho and you're busy doing pulling wisdom teeth and doing root canals and crowns and placing some implants or whatever. So yeah, don't think in fear and scarcity. But anyway, there's this one dentist in Australia, and he started doing that. So he was in NSW, New South Wales, Sydney, and eventually his practice grew to, he brought on 3 associates after he started doing that. Now he has a practice in North, South, East, and West Sydney, and now each one of those offices is doing $10 million a year. In fact, before the pandemic, he invited me to his 50th or 60th birthday party, and on the bill was going to be Mel Gibson, and who's that other Australian actor that was in like who's the other big one? It's Mel Gibson and
Hugh Jackman.
No, the guy in and he was a swordsman in the Gladiator.
Russell Crowe.
Yeah, they were both going to be on his ship in the city. I could have gone there for 17 hours, seen my brother who moved there and never came back, and met Mel Gibson and that other guy you said. But that's how much money he's made by making a relationship with all the general dentists in the community. Gosh darn, there's 10,800 orthodontists, but there's 150,000 general dentists that work 32 hours a week or more. And it's a huge market. Don't go into fear and scarcity. And another thing to pick up, like if you're in Arizona, the hustling orthodontists, and by I mean hustling, they all have the same thing in common. They got a stay-home wife, and they got 3, 4, 5, 6 kids. And I don't want to say they're Mormon because they're not, they're LDS. And what they'll do is on that Friday, when they only work Monday through Thursday, Friday they'll get in their car and they'll drive an hour up to Globe, or they'll go up to Payson, or they'll go up to some city that's only got like 1,500 to 3,000 people, and there's only 1 or 2 dentists in there, and he'll knock out the orthodontist cases 1 day a month, and they'll do it for 50%. So the patient pays $1, the orthodontist gets 50 cents, the dentist gets 50 cents, whatever the heck. But no, you can't go fear and scarcity. It's like a pizza pie. A dentist never wants a partnership because they'll say, well, I have a pizza, I don't want to cut it in half. Well, I know if you moved to Phoenix, Arizona, and you came bought half of my Today's Dental right up the street, I know if we were doing $1, if I brought you on as a 50-50 partner, within a year we'd be doing $3. So my half of the pizza would have gone from $1 to $1.50, but the dentist thinks in zero-sum game. He thinks, well, I'm not going to sell out half my business to Glenn. That would be crazy. And no fear and scarcity. Open yourself up to all the general dentists. Help them everything you can. You want to be your general dentist's best friend. And when you bail a dentist out, I saw this in my area. I'm in Phoenix, but everybody in Phoenix calls it Ahwatukee because Ahwatukee was annexed to Phoenix in like 1984. And this one orthodontist fell on bad times or whatever, and he had to basically close down. His patients weren't going to be finished. He was crying. I was crying. Other people were all sad and everything. And this young, hustling orthodontist in Canada says, hey, don't even worry about it. Send me all your patients. I'll finish them for free. Told the state board, don't go after this guy for a vanity pay. That's crazy. Well, guess what all the dentists in Ahwatukee did? They completely, madly fell in love with this Canadian orthodontist who can't even say about. He says a boot. And my God, he's so that no fear, no scarcity, don't take advantage. He's a sovereign calling. There's enough business for everybody. And then I'll give you one proof from my lifetime. When I was in high school in 1980, when I tell people this story, they don't believe me, but one of my friends was Brian Hesse. And I always thought his dad was this guy at his house. Turns out he had 21 brothers and sisters. That was his oldest brother. His dad was the grandpa. I had no idea. 21 kids. My mom and dad had 7 kids in 3 days. This is a Catholic problem they have with Vatican birth control. And only the ugliest kid who had no chance of ever getting married and would have to go straight into the nunnery or the priesthood got the ortho. Now you have birth control. The families went from 5.5 to 2.5. Every kid's getting ortho in grammar school, and then when they get a touch up before they get married, and then as soon as they get divorced, all my cosmetic rehab cases were always fixer-uppers on the divorce scene. They're 40. They got to go back out on Tinder or Plenty of Fish or whatever, and they're getting all fixed up. So you've gone from a market when I was in high school to only 1 out of 5 or 6 kids got ortho. Now both kids are going to get ortho 3 times in their lifetime. And you won't believe this. I don't want to throw my aunt Sue under the bridge, but my aunt Sue came to me, and she was, due to HIPAA, I can't say she was 65. She was just some proverbial, a lot older age. And I worked on, and anyway, she's in the practice, and she let out this little slip. And she said, I just wish if I could go back in time that I would have got ortho when I was in school, but we couldn't afford it. And, my husband and your mom and all this stuff. And I said, well, Aunt Sue, you can still get ortho. So I called Harry Green. Harry Green came down to my office, and he did the tip edge ortho on it. That was 25 years ago. She's now like 85, and she still says the greatest thing that ever happened to her is when she turned 65, and her little nephew Howie and the great orthodontist Harry Green. And so I'm seeing. Well, I'll ask you, what's the oldest orthodontic patient you've personally ever seen in your lifetime?
New patient, 92 years old. 92 years old. Now, I will say, in respect to her, she did pass before we finished treating her, and it was functional. She had one tooth that was banging into everything on the bottom, and she needed to get out of the way because she is missing so many teeth you couldn't take it out because she wouldn't have had enough. She didn't want to look around without a missing front tooth, but it was banging, occluding into her upper teeth. But I would say if you took that out of the picture, probably early 80s, 81, 82. But I mean, still, that's older than the average lifespan of most Americans today.
So if an orthodontist is listening to this, my gosh, if you're going to not only become a dentist, but an orthodontist, and then live in America, the greatest country, it's got more problems than anybody, but it's the way I look at America is this: there's 220 countries. everything America has done is embarrassing and crazy and stupid. But when you go to all those countries and you talk to dentists all around the world, we're all sitting in a bar, and at closing time, believe it or not, America is the least drunk of all the countries. It's like America should have its keys taken away, and it's actually the most sober driver. Warren Buffett told me a million times, never ever bet against America. It's not going to happen. It's the land of the individual, not the big governments and all that, no matter how distorted it gets. So don't live in fear and scarcity. Think hope, growth, and abundancy. Grow the market. And the more your general dentist does class 1 molar Invisaligns, the more chance that he's going to start referring people to you. And when they come in, and let me tell general dentists this, man, when you have to, nobody knows when the market's going to crash. I say all cash shall crash, but Charlie Munger just said the other day, he says, nobody in the world can predict how long this bubble will go on. The 2 rules of bubbles are they always get bigger than anyone ever imagined, and they always pop. But nobody can predict the future. But let me tell you this, and you're a general dentist. If when you take a class 1 molar, class 1 canine, non-growing adult, and you can do some new things. But man, when you have to take a SAP, and you have to start making predictions of how this child's going to grow and develop and things like that, dude, you're way in over your head. It's not fun anymore. When you're tracing a SAP, it's time to pack up and go home. And general dentists do have some advantages on class 1 molar, class 1 canines, because how many times have we seen this? It was very common in the 80s and early 90s where some orthodontists would 4 bicuspids pulled, and then they'd straighten the teeth in like 6 months and then spend a year and a half closing those deals. And a lot of times the general dentist can say, okay, I need 5 millimeters space, but he's got these 4 big MOD amalgams. I'll just take them out, switch them to composites MODs with open contacts. I'm going to take out that bulging PFM on first molar and make it with open contacts. So when you're working with your orthodontist on these class 1 non-growing adults, you can do them a lot faster. But I think whenever an orthodontist has an intimate relationship with a general dentist regarding the subject of orthodontist, they're both going to, 1 + 1 is going to equal 3. 2 + 2 is going to equal 8. Just keep the relationship open, and you're both going to grow your way to success. And if you want to think fear and scarcity, get out of town.
I love it, man. And I think this is a great place for us to end, because we've covered pretty much everything in dentistry that's possible. And we're ending on a positive note, because I agree with you 1,000%, which is there's enough out there on the fruit on the trees for everybody. I agree with you 100% that most general dentists, myself, when I did it for 20 years, do not want to be doing ortho all the time. Are there some out there we can point to and say, oh, there's a guy or a gal who's been doing tons of ortho in their practice for 20 years? Yes. But the overwhelming majority of the GPs out there, they want to do some ortho. They want to play around with some simple, quote unquote, simple cases. And the more they look, the more they're going to refer. And I think I agree with you 100% with everything you said. And before we go, I just want to ask you, Ortho Town, Dental Town, if someone wants to learn more, do they just go to orthotown.com or dentaltown.com and sign up and become a member of the community?
Well, Ortho Town is only for orthodontists, so I can't even get on Ortho. I'm not a member of Ortho Town. Dental Town, the same orthodontists on Ortho Town, they're all on Dental Town, and they just want a place to go talk about. But I want to say one last thing. What we started with, I compliment you. You're the only orthodontist I know that got his FAGD first. When I got my FAGD, I got in a big pissing match with the head of the AGD in Arizona. I was saying, well, I'm not going to do ortho. I don't want to learn that. I'm not going to do implants. I don't want to learn that. I want my $500 just to do in fillings and cleanings and crowns. Yeah. And he put his arm around me and said, Howard, he goes, you're 24 and it's called cross training and you need to learn this stuff. And I went in there kicking and screaming and yelling. And to do it, I had to sign up for Carl Mish's 7 3-day weekend course in Pittsburgh. And to get ortho, I had to do Richard Lett and all these others. But exactly, when I got done with my FAGD, I was diagnosing twice as much ortho because I didn't know a damn thing about it in dental school. And the minute these general dentists start understanding ortho, they start referring to how. You can't refer something that you don't know what it is. So you just nailed it on the head, man. Teach your general dentist everything to know about orthodontics. They'll respect it, they'll see it, they'll appreciate it, and you'll get more referrals.
Right on, man. Well, Howard, I could talk to you for days, and I appreciate your time here today. And keep up the good fight. Thank you for what you've created with OrthoTown for orthodontists. I know we've got a number of our members and Orthopreneurs who are also a member of that community and have great things to say. And just thank you, sir, for being a part of this.
Oh, man, the honor was all mine. Anytime you want me to come back, I'm always here.
Oh, man, you can count on it. How about 1 year from now, if the stock market isn't up, if the stock market is not down, I will have you back on and we'll talk about it.
Oh, my gosh. I doubt it'll happen, but no one can predict the future. Have a great day, man. Thanks for having me on your show. It was an honor.
Thanks. I appreciate it, Howard. Thank you.